Hopefully, I don't cut you.
I got it here on the next.
Hey, everybody! We're live and direct from Norway. To another Norwegian actually. Within Norway, we're doing an online interview. I've been on an 8-month hiatus, so I haven't seen you guys in a long time. Real Nordic Black family. But anyway, today we have a special guest. I don't want to butcher her name. The author Maria Kvilhaug or Kvilhaug.
Kvilhaug. Yeah.
Kvilhaug. I like
Kvilhaug.
how you say it a
Yeah.
lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, she's an author, a religious historian, and author of English language literature on Norse mythology, pre-Christian religion and culture, such as the Great Knowledge. You're gonna have to say that name for me. Is it
This one,
Fjoking?
uh,
The Great Knowledge.
Fjölkyngi. Yeah, Fjölkyngi. It's a direct translation of the term Fjölkyngi. It means
All right.
great knowledge.
Stories of Sia. I can't even pronounce it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seidun.
Okay.
That
And
is a form
initiation.
of, yeah, an
And,
initiation. Yeah.
right. And that was one of your latest, correct?
That's my latest. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
the Maiden with the Mead, a goddess of initiation rituals in Old Norse myths,
That's
2022.
uh, that's my first. It was republished
Okay.
in an extended version. It's like the double the size of the original one that came out. Well, it was actually a university thesis
Okay.
that I wrote in 2004. And then it
Wow.
was
Huh.
that thesis was published in 2009 at first, and then it was republished in an extended version in 2022 by my
Okay.
new publisher. Yeah.
And then
Uh,
we have the seed of Yggdrasil.
yes, yes, very well,
I'm
very
telling
good.
you, I'm
Yeah,
butchering these
yeah,
the
yeah.
seed of
Uh,
Yggdrasil. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's the one that most people know about. I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that was
that's
2000. It was published in 2013, but
first. Yeah,
okay, okay.
and then I had to change publisher. I went to
Yeah,
a new publisher, and I republished that one too, with the
okay,
Three Little Sisters. Yeah,
okay. And we definitely
yeah.
will get your correct information this time underneath the video with all your links and information about you after the interview. I have to correct some things.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so I guess if we could start out about yourself on how did you what is your training in this? Is it were you in history, or did you just have interest in Norse mythology? I mean, you are Norwegian, so
Mm.
it's kind of, I guess
The history.
we would assume automatic, but then again, not all Norwegians are kind of into their own mythology. So could you
Definitely not. There is a reason why I started to write in English
oh,
because
oh,
yeah. Oh,
I'm trying to get you in there, not me.
yeah.
Ah,
Well,
lady.
oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I came from a family where people were very interested in history.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. But so I learned a lot about mythology at home and sagas and things, and also in general history, really.
Right.
And but my first passion actually was Minoan Crete, Minoan culture.
Okay.
I got into that when I was about 15
Yeah.
because we went, yeah. My parents took me to Crete for 3 weeks, and we were backpacking around the island. And we
Okay.
had been there before, but that year I was 15, so I was very conscious about it. And when I say we backpacked, we traveled around by bus with our backpacks and went from village to village. And we went also to, I can't even count. I think we went to a new site, archaeological Minoan site, almost every day, and to the
Yeah.
museum in Heraklion. So I was really into Minoan history for many years,
Wow.
and general ancient history. Uh, the interest in Minoan history brought me into being interested in other ancient cultures, like Egypt, Mesopotamia, Assyria, the Akkadian. I mean, all those things. I was very interested in that for many years.
Yeah.
I realized that if I wanted to actually study these cultures, I would have to choose one and I would have to try and learn the language.
Yeah.
And it was not my thing to become an archaeologist. I was thought about this, but I was more interested in text, in history, historical
Yeah.
text. And at some point, I got this epiphany when I was rereading the Poetic Edda in translation into English, actually. And I thought, there is something here really interesting. And I started to look at the original text because I have learned some Old Norse in school, actually. We're Norwegian, so at least when I was that age, 16, 17, we did learn a bit of Old Norse.
Right.
And it's also, and I realized that this is a language that is very accessible to me because my language descends from the Old Norse, and it was not easy, I would say, but at least relatively easy to start learning that language. And the more
Right.
I delved into it, the more excited I got about how, first of all, it was great literature, great poetry, and I felt that it had some deeper meanings that were both philosophical and spiritual in some way. And I thought that was really exciting, and I just got really into it. More and more. So it ended up being my specialty after all. So
Right. Right.
yeah,
Were you raised religious?
no,
Excuse me. No.
not at all.
Okay. So
My parents were, well, they were like children of the 1960s. They were not, they were atheists basically. So
right.
I was raised atheist. Of course, around me, the Norwegian culture was Christian as a whole, but it's a very secular society. You may have noticed. Even then, my my grandparents, for example, most of them were Christian, sort of, but they thought that it was more important to go into the forest on Sundays because it was
Right.
they refer to it as God's free nature. So
Right. Right.
uh, yeah, so they were not church goers really. So,
Okay. So some of the things that appeal to you from Norse mythology, do you recall some of the earlier, I guess, when you first started to go into it? I know you always like history, like you said, the Minoan culture. You start out when you
yeah.
went to Crete and things like that. Are there some elements that kind of just drew you to the Norse mythology? I mean, although
Not
you are Nordic and
uh,
Scandinavian, so
uh,
yeah, any
I thought it was
particular,
really interesting what I found in Crete, these labyrinth
yeah,
symbols of the labyrinth. Yeah.
yeah,
And we find the exact same symbols in Scandinavia from the same era. So I thought that
mm,
there must have been some connection. And that was really exciting because I felt this strong connection to Minoan culture, even though I was from Scandinavia. And then um, I realized that, wow, they must have had some sort of connection to Scandinavia back
right,
4,000 years ago. And with the more we learn about Bronze Age history, we know that Scandinavians of the Bronze Age traveled very widely and
yes,
did travel into the Mediterranean world and had contact with all the countries, Southern Europe, the Middle East, and the North Africa. So it makes sense that
right,
symbols and ideas could travel. I did see when I first had this epiphany about the poetic Edda. To be honest, I like to. I'm an academic. I'm not very religious.
mm,
But uh, but I actually had these dreams, so
right,
that were about going into the underworld and meeting the Norns and meeting the goddess of the dead, Hel, and it was I was like 20 years old, so this, when you're 20, having these dreams, it makes a big impression. It felt like fate in a way. So
Right.
and I also had sort of gotten into Minoan culture because I was a young woman. I was 15, and I didn't feel, well, many young people don't feel that they fit into general society. I really did feel that too. I didn't feel at home with uh,
Right.
the
The
culture,
tradition.
the modern culture,
Okay. Right.
really.
Right.
Not that doesn't mean I want to go back to tradition, because what tradition? Traditions have changed with every
Right.
century.
Right.
So no, it wasn't that. It was that the Minoan culture gave me. Well, they had goddesses, a lot of them, and they had powerful women, and that was important to me then. And I sort of guess I dismissed old Norse myths a bit that era because um, I thought they were too focused on the men, because that was how
Mm.
I had been taught. I
Good.
had been
Good.
taught that it was all about men. Really, they had strong women, and then it was all about men. They always
Right.
had the strong women, but then it was all about men. When I
So,
started to read about Old Norse, the poetry and everything, it was like, wow, this is a lot more balanced. It was very balanced between the male and female elements in mythology than
mm.
I would have. So yeah, that too brought me.
But
Yeah.
it's nice that you mentioned that because I hadn't noticed. Well, speaking of labyrinth, you had mentioned the word labyrinth. You
Yeah.
have She has a YouTube channel, Lady of Labyrinth. Don't let her fool you. She has almost about 20,000 followers, subscribers on her channel. So she's been out there in social media a bit, and her channel's been growing, and things. Are you on another any other social media that you use frequent? Like,
Uh, yeah. I use
when it
Facebook,
when
and
it
uh,
I mean, when it comes to the, okay, Facebook, when it comes to the information, like the your work, does it?
yeah, my work. I actually I worked so many years on YouTube for free,
Yeah. Right.
countless hours. I was working like almost half
Okay.
time on YouTube, and I didn't earn anything. Basically, I
Right.
did it all free, and I worked part time as a care assistant
Right. Right.
for
No,
the
what I mean,
elderly. So
what I
it
mean,
was exhausting. Yeah. Now
right.
it's the Patreon.com,
Okay.
Patreon.com with my name after slash and Maria Kvilhaug, and that's where I now publish my lectures
Okay.
and podcasts and everything. And it doesn't cost that much, but it actually gives me an income from this
Right.
work.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Now, you had one of your YouTube videos where you were talking about about history, how it's not what it used to be. And
Yeah.
what do you mean by what did you mean by that right there?
History is not what it used to be. It's a very long time ago, but I think
Oh,
that was about. I think it was about how history it
oh,
changes when it's
right.
presented. That it.
Okay.
Um, I think it was in reaction to the Vikings TV show. Actually, is that
Okay. Okay.
if I remember correctly?
Okay. 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 Okay.
Uh,
I thought
yeah.
I tried to tie it into what. Okay, it's further back than I thought. I tried to tie it into what you were kind of getting into about how you seen mostly men, like a kind of patriarchal, you know,
Well,
when
yeah.
it's an. So I kind of try. I thought it was a, because I know you are, and what we're gonna get into later. One of the she's working on something, and I'll let you give the title later. But the inclusion of other people into the Norse mythology, like women and people of color and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I'll let you. Uh, I guess get into that right there because you had hinted on that right there. You said that you had noticed a lot of North mythology with just mainly like men and things like that. So what did you? So what was your approach to this, or what was your thoughts on that subject?
Well, first of all, I thought it was a bit. Well, I was 15. I thought it was a bit boring because
Yeah.
it was all about the guys, and I wanted something that was more uh, I guess about me or
Yeah. Right.
about women, basically.
Right.
Something that I could recognize,
Yeah.
and that I felt like I was that we women were being sort of made to vanish. When
Right.
actually, when actually women and also the female powers of mythology are actually extremely important.
Right.
That does not mean it was Viking Age was not a patriarchal society. It was a patriarchal society, but it had a but as long as it was pagan, it had an amazing lack of misogyny. There was this great
Mm.
respect for women, especially for women's intelligence. That appealed to me when I discovered it. Like, oh, that this is more interesting than I wanted to bring back to life that which had been suppressed in a way. And it was funny you talked about. I have to admit, I didn't that at that time I didn't really think to look for uh, black people or foreigners in these Norse sources. That was not something I did consciously, but I was probably more interested in gender and gender expressions and how that works. But when I started to share my work, um, I was I have been a book nerd, and my background is it's just I wasn't prepared for how many people who were just in it for the whiteness. Uh, I was
Mm.
really shocked when I discovered that nearly half of my I don't know if half, but quite a lot of my followers liked my work. Um, Mostly because they were looking for some well,
White preservation
yeah,
of some sort, or
yeah,
some place to, and that's what we're
yeah,
gonna and that's what we're gonna get into actually, because I was gonna
yeah,
ask you
yeah,
about your feelings on the, because I came across some video. I don't know if it was Vox or AJ Plus, or it's one of those companies that they put out some educational videos on YouTube, and they were talking about the Norse mythology and paganism and the rise of it in America in particular,
yeah, yeah.
and and they're talking about, in dealing with racism and things like that. Like, have you heard of Asatru Folks Assembly?
Åsatru, the
Yeah,
Åsatru Folk Assembly in
yeah.
yes, yes. I think I don't. I think they might be. I heard some bad things about them, but
Right,
uh,
exactly. So
yeah,
I didn't even
yeah,
know about these things. Yeah, and well, first off, there's a difference between what paganism, heathenism, and asatru and things like that. Or could you distinguish them in a basic level that you know
um,
of? I
uh,
guess. Yeah.
since I've been more interested in history than in modern paganism, but
Okay.
I have noticed what I discovered, and that I like that modern pagans, a lot of modern pagans really liked my work and found it very inspiring because I
Yeah.
do describe and explain rituals and religious beliefs of the past, and that appealed to a lot of modern pagans or modern heathens, and there are so many groups. I
True.
can't
True.
really
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and I know that especially in America, you have to be really careful because some of these groups are racist or
Right.
maybe, well, semi-racist or something.
Right. Right.
And
Right. Right.
yeah,
No, no,
yeah,
but yeah. So okay, so I get it. But yeah, no, I listened to this thing, and there are, like you said, there are modern groups that are trying to have more inclusion within those pagan or
definitely,
Norse mythology. Definitely, I see that, because
definitely,
there are groups that,
especially in. Uh, in Iceland nowadays, there have been a revival of the pagan beliefs, and they are very, very anti-racist, and
right, right,
progressive people, and they are pagan,
right,
and they can show to a lot of reasons why we should not actually be. Well, those of us who are not racist, we think that they are. hijacking our cultural heritage.
Right.
Basically, they are making it into something small and stupid and ugly
Right.
because
And,
that's what
and you know,
classic
and that was one
civilization is.
and
Yeah.
that was one reason why I reached out to you, Maria, is because
Mm,
I didn't realize you were into this North mythology because we follow each other on Facebook. So I was like,
mm,
I post a lot about anti-racism and
mm,
atheism and anti-religion and anti-colonialism and things like that. So that usually
mm,
wouldn't I would think appeal to anybody that's deep into this Norse mythology. So I had no
mm,
clue that you were into that. So when I saw on my Facebook wall some of your posts, then I was like, hold up,
mm,
she's into North mythology. And so then I was like,
mm,
wow, she's been. But I remember your name and things. So I was like, she's been on my we've been following each other for a while on Facebook. So if she hasn't jumped off of my Facebook yet, that means she definitely can tolerate some of my posts
mm,
or whatever, and so she must not be tied to that other side of it. So
mm.
that's why I reached out to you because of the
Yeah.
fact. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think that you would be very safe with most Norwegian pagans or
Right,
heathens because
right.
in Norway, most of the groups they are very inclusive. I have been holding lectures for a heathen group called it's called Åsatrufellesskapet Bifrost. Åsatru just means belief in the Esu god, and Bifrost is the rainbow bridge um, between the worlds. So they are very inclusive, very anti-racist, and very nice people. Actually, I
Mm,
almost owe it to them that I made that I started to write the book, The Great Knowledge,
mm,
because they invited me to speak about these subjects once. So in Norway, it's the groups that may be really racist. I don't even know who they are. I know there are some racist groups in Sweden, but also a lot of very inclusive groups. I think
right.
Fornsted in Sweden is very um, it's
Mm,
well, I should be a bit careful what I say here because I really don't have this complete overview.
ri-
Uh,
right, right,
but
right, right,
uh,
right.
but most of the racist groups that are into Norse mythology because I think it's about being white or something.
Yeah, right, right.
They
I don't expect you to know all the
uh,
groups of,
no,
North paganism or mythology, but it was but a lot of these groups, you're correct, they try to use that to justify their racism, like some people do in the with the Bible and what
yeah,
people do with other things. Um
yeah.
I remember Soldiers of Odin, the Odin in the name, out of
Yeah.
Tonsberg. I remember that group when I
That
first came to
sounds a
Norway.
bit Soldiers of Odin. That
Yeah,
sounds
right. I remember
a
that
bit.
group. Yeah,
Uh, yeah.
but the, I guess you when you talk about history on your channel and things like that, you kind of I guess talked about the the history, not what somebody has kind of made up, and maybe you kind of I don't know if you go back and kind of correct some of these ideologies or some of these things that people are trying to use to justify the racism. I don't know if I've seen
I
you.
did I did get into a lot of discussions
Yeah,
so, for a while, and I just had to sort of uh, just I just couldn't take it anymore.
right.
You can't really give them too much of a platform on your page.
True, true, true.
That's why should
Yeah,
they? They have their own platform, so I don't
right,
need
right.
their views on my page. And I also had to make it very clear that I was
Mm,
completely against this.
right,
I do not support that sort of. I think it.
right.
I really do think that they are trying to make this amazing poetry and this really interesting
I
past
agree.
into something small that fits their
Right,
narcissism. Yeah.
right.
Mm.
It's
You
funny.
somehow you need to feel better than everybody, and that's like actually the opposite of the message of Odin, for example.
Right.
in the Håvamål, and that's an Edda poem about. Well, most of it is about rightful conduct, and it's put in the mouth of Odin, the greatest god, and he emphasizes the need to not think. He even said directly that nobody is better than anybody else. Nobody is the greatest. When you come among lots of other people, you cannot say who is the best. And he says that if you became disabled, if you lost an arm or a leg, you can still do things. It's only death that can stop you from doing um, meaningful things with your life. There's just so many messages about humility, about not thinking yourself too big. That is just at odds with their need to feel really like I'm better than someone. Maybe they need to compensate for low self-esteem by feeling
Right.
better than some large group of people. I don't know. It's just very stupid.
Right.
And
And
also, it's not really coin. It doesn't really fit with the historical part of it.
there you go. There you go.
Yeah,
That's what,
yeah,
and that's what I one reason why I reached out to you too, because I'm really into the historical side of things instead of all these other things that most people are always thinking.
mm,
Whether it's about the historical Jesus or this or that, because that's what I kind of like to get
mm,
down on the facts of the matter. Yeah.
yeah,
But it's funny because I got my name the real Nordic Black. So
yeah. What
I
does that mean?
yeah, no, I put I just put some name together, I guess, to get attention. And so, like, as you know, that people are into this Nordic mythology or whatever, and I say if they see this black guy, with
Yeah,
Nordic black, then that'll kind of really raise some, what is this about or whatever. And I got some flack from having Nordic black from those so-called right-leaning people or racist or whatever that feel like I shouldn't have my
yeah,
name Nordic black or whatever like that. But that's a whole nother story, and I guess we'll partly get into that.
yeah. I actually have some ideas, but yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no,
um,
but that's the thing, because the
yeah,
especially in the past, most people when they hear the word Nordic, they automatically assume that it's a blonde hair, blue-eyed, and things like that.
mm,
Or if it's Nordic black, they think it's something with black metal or death metal or something like
yeah,
that. But
mm,
so I kind of it just suddenly, I didn't think so long on my YouTube name or whatever, but I said, you know what, that'll catch attention. I said the real is like, because
mm,
I listen to hip hop or whatever. Like I'm African American, so the real, keep it real.
mm,
And then I said Nordic Black, and I just crunched it together. I was like, that'll get somebody looking. I mean, I'm living in Norway now, and so black, and then maybe they'll think, and you have some people think, oh, it's an oxymoron, Nordic Black. What are you doing? I was like, well, it made you look, and actually it's not only, if you really look, some of the latest research, that not all, people, were blonde hair, blue eyed, and things like that. So
mm,
I kind of use that name to gather some attention, if you will. And that's what's
yeah,
gonna bring us into, I guess, uh, the why I mainly brought you here to talk about this article that you are is soon about to publish, correct?
yeah.
And could you talk a little bit about that? And I know that's what my audience would love to hear a little bit about.
Mm. Oh,
Um,
yeah. Yeah, I was recently asked to write an article about. Well, it was for a bigger project in um, within the Norwegian university system. It's going to be published in Norwegian on their website in, I think, August or September, so it's a while until that. The theme of the project was immigration, women immigrants coming to Norway, both historically and today. And I was asked to do the Viking Age bit. And and I thought that was going to be very difficult because there's not a lot of information about immigrant women during the Viking Age. To be honest, most of the women who came in from abroad are probably, most of them are probably taken as slaves. So and you don't really hear that much about slaves. Because if you go back that time, they also discriminated between people, but they didn't discriminate on grounds of ethnicity or skin color. They discriminated on grounds of family lineage. So if you had
Definitely.
that, sort of, yeah,
Yeah, no, no,
uh,
I didn't want to cut you off, but I like that you mentioned that because I
mm,
talked about that as well, and I'm into that. I into the racism, like in antiquity, and how it was
yes,
different than how it is how
yeah,
modern day racism. And so you're tinkering on that right now. So I like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And what we uh, I when I started to work on the great knowledge, that was actually how I came across so many of these stories. Because I had until then used the Old Norse language to read the poetry base mostly, and I had and maybe some mythology work I had read in the Old Norse language. But when I
yeah,
started to go into the great knowledge, I had to go into the saga material. And since I'm very concerned with the meanings of words, I started to read the sagas that I used, at least the parts of the sagas that I was using in the Old Norse language. It's very easy now because you can find a lot of them online actually in the Old Norse language. And I was a bit surprised because I had never noticed this in translation. Things get lost in translation. Maybe the translators, for some reason, um, look past it or don't want to mention it or something. But I read first, I remember I read this Egil Skallagrimson. Egil Skallagrimson is one of the most famous characters in the sagas that you learn about in school and everything. He was a berserker, that's the man who could transform into this fighting animal. And he was a poet and a fierce warrior and poet at the same time. And when I started to read about him, it said Egil var svarter mader. And I was, svarter mader. That means a black man. Um, and so was his father, who was also a famous warrior. His father
oh,
Skallagrim.
mm,
Yeah, and his father, who was called Kvelhaug. All of them were svartrar, black. And
mm.
now, of course, this is not usually translated as black men. And I'm not saying that when you say that a person is svartir in this era, it doesn't specify ethnicity or where you're from. If they had been like African, it would have said that they were blå men. But that would be people who came from Africa. This
I'm
man,
glad I'm glad you distinguished that because
uh,
there'll be some
uh,
people that are you'll get some pushback from
uh,
hearing this from white people, from Nordic
uh,
Scandinavian people. Say, hold up, black must mean his hair. That doesn't necessarily mean he's black. Let's get
yeah,
that.
it could mean his hair.
Mm,
We
right,
do not know since it doesn't specify. But
right,
it's
right.
interesting that in another saga we hear about a descendant who is descended from Egil Skallagrimson and all these people to the mother
Mm,
side. And he is described as Kolbeater. His name is Illugi Tagildarbani. And he was often underestimated because he was so dark. Uh,
okay,
yeah, dark colored and coal beater, as bitten by coal, that means, which
okay.
means really black. Yes.
Right, right, right.
Uh,
Definitely.
but and he had to sort of prove himself, and it turned out to be a really wise man who started to teach young men and women in matters of wisdom, in the pagan wisdom. Um, and traveled along. Well, really amazing story in the stories. Yeah, a real
Mm,
hero. And then we have this other saga, which is also, and what is interesting is that these uh, svartrar, these
mm,
black men, whatever that meant, they are all the heroes, the main characters of these famous sagas. Uh, and then there is another saga called the Saga of Bosi and Harald. It's about a prince called Harald and his best friend, who's called Bosi, who is a commoner. but his parents were warriors. In this era, in the pagan era, even commoners could be warriors. So you have this notion of a peasant warrior, but they were different from they discriminated against peasant warriors and noble warriors. Like noble warriors were expected to have a sword, for example, while
Yeah.
peasant warriors they could do with a axe. And Bosi, he's also dark. He's described as a duck-elite, which means dark colored. Um, and I have seen other uh, sagas where we also hear the term black, but then it is specified that they are actually black of hair, like Halfdan Svarte, Halfdan the Black. He was the father of the first king of whole who united Norway into a nation. Um,
Yeah.
and he was said to be, he was called Halfdan the Black because, according to Snorri, who wrote this hundreds of years after Halfdan's life time, he explained that he had really black hair. Um, but none of these really specify what it means to be dark colored, coal bitten, or black. But there is actually not really a saga. Well, it's a saga called Sturlunga Saga, so I should call it a saga, but it's more like a chronicle. And you also find this story in a different version in the Landnoma book, which is a chronicle about the history of the settling of Iceland.
Okay.
Which is, yeah. And one of the men who settled first in Iceland was, they said it was empty. Apparently, there were some Irish monks there before the Norsemen came. But
Mm.
during the ninth century, lots of Norwegian nobles escaped Norway because of the unification of the country. Because Norway had been divided into like 30 different small kingdoms,
Right.
and all these small kingdoms were now degraded from being kings because Harald Hårfagre,
Right.
King Harald, the son of Halfdan the Black, had united all of Norway. Um, and one of these was called Geirmund Heljarskinn. He was one of the most important chieftains. He was a prince from one of
Mm.
these Norwegian kingdoms. He was the son of a king, and he settled there. And he came with like hundreds. He was like he was actually a Viking because he was a pirate, uh, and he went a Viking in Ireland, and
Mm.
he had like hordes of Norse, Norwegian, Danish, Irish, Swedish warriors beneath him, and he also had hundreds of Irish slaves
Yeah.
uh, when he came to Iceland to settle. He's a very powerful man, and he was not only described as Svarter, as a black man. He was specifically said to have black skin.
Okay.
Um, when he and his brother were born, they were twins. They were described. It is said that nobody had ever seen Bekra skin, darker skin than these two
Mm.
boys. That was
Mm.
because their mother was very dark of skin. There's a whole story about this. It probably take too much time to. Well, actually, it's a very interesting story. I have to tell it because
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
their mother, Ljusvina, and uh, she was from a place called Bjarmaland, and that is actually by the White Sea up in northeastern Russia today.
Okay.
And around there, lots of people live who are like Samoyeds. During
Yeah.
the Viking Age, they also lived there. Usually Finnic, Ugric people who
Right.
lived very much like Inuit people in Greenland or Alaska
Right.
did at the time, and the Sami did at the time. They were hunters. They are described as dressed in furs and hunting
Mm.
seals and things
Mm.
like that.
Mm.
So she came from there, and she was probably taken captive. It says in one of the sources that she was taken captive when the king of a place called Karmsund, that's on the west coast of Norway. It was a very
Mm.
powerful kingdom there on the west coast of Norway in the county of Rogaland.
Okay.
And
Got you.
there was a royal seat in Avaldsnes, and the king there, young king, King Jør, He traveled up to Bjarmaland and he herjade, he says that he harried. That means that he pillaged and basically a very
Mm.
nasty man, probably.
Right.
But something happened on the course of the journey back home from the north, back um,
Hmm.
to Rogaland. Some reason when they arrived, she was presented as the daughter of the king of Björnland. There was, of course, no king in Björnland. People were um, maybe she was the daughter of a chief, I don't know, but she was said to be captured. Then she was presented as the daughter of the king of Björnland, and that sort of gave her the nobility needed to become queen. So she became queen of this small kingdom, and she was very dark skinned. One of her descendants, this is a historical person, and one of her descendants in Iceland, Bergstein Birgisson, he has written a book about her and her son uh, called Den Svarte Vikingen, that means the Black Viking.
I heard of that.
Because,
Yeah.
yeah, and he took DNA tests to figure out is there any truth to this? And they discovered that, yeah, there is an input from exactly this time from a people who lived in Björmland up there by the White Sea during the Viking Age, but who actually came far away and they were known to be very dark skinned. Um, now, the queen was at home while the king was out, again, probably harrying in some other land. And she was at home alone and she was pregnant. And she was Ljusvina, her name. She also had a slave woman who was white,
Hmm.
and they were pregnant at the same time. Then
Hmm.
they both gave birth. The slave woman gave birth to a little boy called Leif, and he is described in the saga as Hviter, like white. While when the two boys were born, that she gave birth to twins. The queen, the black queen, she's described as black. It doesn't mean she's from Africa,
Right. Right.
but dark, very dark. And
Right.
they described it then as Svartis, that means black. And she gave birth to two boys who were also actually very. It described that they are really mjög svartrar,
Mm.
very black,
Mm.
and nobody had ever seen Dekra skin, darker skin than these
Mm.
two
Mm.
boys.
You,
And the
I,
queen panicked.
you
Yeah,
know, in the because I got a lot of, I'm sure a lot of people from America more so listening in my audience compared to, I got
yes,
more, I believe I got more Americans than Norwegians listening. Now, when you keep on saying these, like the skin tone, the skin color, as you were saying, you were pointing out that back then, it didn't necessarily, when they said black or dark skin, it didn't necessarily mean they were of African origin.
no,
Correct.
it doesn't
And it
specify.
doesn't,
It
and
doesn't
it doesn't,
specify. Yeah.
right. And it doesn't
We
exclude
do
them.
no,
Yeah.
it doesn't either. It doesn't exclude them either.
Yeah.
Um, the thing is that they had. Well, I just want to tell the story because
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Go
uh,
ahead. No, I
the
just
queen,
chime in.
she panicked. She thought that the king, who was blonde, would not accept two boys who were so black.
Yeah.
That's what it directly said. So she
Yeah.
gave her two black boys to the slave woman, and she stole the white boy from the slave woman and pretended
Mm,
that this white boy was her son. But when the king came back and the boys were 3 years old, it was noted that this white prince was really weak. He was crying a lot. He was timid. He was not intelligent. While the two black slave boys were really intelligent, really smart, and really tough
mm,
and brave. And basically, the end of the story is like the king sent his skull, that is his poet, which is also his sort of counselor, to go to the queen and look at he asked her to put the boys together, her son, the white boy, together with these two slave boys, and the slave boys started to bully the prince, and that was also seen as a sign. That is something that occurs a lot in the sagas, that if you are too bold for your station, for your rank, then it
Hmm.
probably means that they really were of a higher lineage because they thought that this quality of being bold and smart and strong and tough and intelligent was uh, was a sign of nobility or royalty. And then so the skull goes and he speaks out a poem where the queen is made aware that these two boys they have all the signs of royalty, even though they are slaves. And this prince he acts like a slave, or he's of slave lineage. So there's a different kind of discrimination here. But the moral of the story is that the queen takes her two boys and she says, I'm to the king, her husband, and says, I'm really, really sorry, but I was afraid that you would not accept these two boys as your sons because they don't look anything like you. And he looks
Mm,
at them and says that, oh, I can see all the similarities. They're obviously of my royal lineage. But he says, I have never seen such hellier skins, and that means skins from Hel. And that was not meant negatively. It sounds a bit. Hel was the goddess of death, and she
mm,
was perceived to be black. That is again very very dark. So basically, they had skins as dark as the goddess of death. And these two young princes, then they got back their status as princes and became very very powerful men. None of them became kings because by the time they grew up, then Norway had been united beneath that Harald. Uh,
right.
mm. And it's interesting that King Harald, the son of Halfdan the Black,
Uh-huh.
we usually know him as Hårfagre, which is translated into English as hair fair. But
Right.
during his
That's what I heard.
lifetime, yeah, that was actually something they added to his nickname later after his death because they thought that his original nickname was a bit um, it didn't suit the first king of all Norway.
Right.
But his
Right.
real name was Harald Luva, which means that his hair was like dreadlocked in some
Mm,
way. That he had
mm.
like this
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, something, yeah. So yeah, not that that means anything necessarily, but interesting. Uh, in any case, the moral of the story in this story about the two,
But it's also
definitely,
significant, you know, her story, the Liu Fina. I think it's
yeah,
significant in when it comes in context of race related discussions in a way. I
yeah,
think.
yeah. I think she must since she reacted like that, she must have been aware of how different she was,
Yeah.
and that she was much darker than everybody else. Because I don't know why would she reject her own boys for being the same color as herself.
Right.
We don't know. We don't even know if the story is true, but we have two stories, two different sources telling the same story,
Right.
uh, and we know that they existed for real. They are historical persons.
Right.
They still have descendants in Iceland. You can actually count. In Iceland, it's very special. It's maybe one of the very few places in the world where people can count their lineages back 30
I've
generations.
heard that from
Yeah, and
many.
they can. Yeah, and they have
Definitely,
one,
and they're
and they
very
have
proud of that
proven it.
too.
Yeah, yeah, probably. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's because they have lived quite separately too, and they have this long tradition of counting. They started it in the Middle Ages
Yeah.
to write down their lineages. So a small society, so it's probably easy to do that. Yeah,
Right.
but the
And
saga material
how do you?
also describes
Oh, go ahead.
uh, people from Africa. We have some stories. There is one saga called the Saga of Sørli the Strong.
Okay.
He travels all the way to Africa. And it says Africa. The saga is relatively late, so before that they would have called it Blåland.
Okay.
But in the saga, I think I remember that I actually usually refer to it as Africa. And when he comes there, he has some adventures. And it says that he is met by African warriors. They don't specify tribe or anything, but they describe them as really scary because they were very tall, very black. They used to they roll their eyes, like
Right.
they open their eyes very widely, so and
Right.
to look
Right.
scary. And when
Right.
they open their mouth, they had like filed teeth, so really
Hmm.
scary African warriors of the. And the story is set to the Viking Age, to more than 1,000 years ago.
Hmm.
And it says that these men from Africa are the greatest warriors in the whole world. It says in this saga. And it probably says that
You-
to show that Sørli actually won the fight. He won this duel with some of them. So, which meant that he was, if I remember correctly, it's a while since I read it, but he fought
Right.
some of them and he won. And it was like that, that meant that he was really strong because he could actually even win a fight with these African warriors.
Right.
And
What?
he actually, after that, he gets a friend, an African sorceress. And when he is in trouble later, she tells him that if he calls her, even if he's in Norway and she is in Africa, if he calls her, she will come to his aid. So he calls
Mm,
her when he's at home in Norway, has a problem with a queen who wants to persecute him, and he calls on his friend, and she actually comes all the way from Africa to help him out to make the queen more friendly to him. And
wow.
in the same saga, he also has to go into a duel with a blåman, which means an African person,
Hmm.
who was in service of a king, a Norwegian king at the time. And this blåman, it means a blue man.
Yeah.
They refer to Africans as blue men.
Right.
Um,
What
and
was the
that's
name?
a
What was the name
technique
of?
that
What
is
was the name of this saga again? How do you?
Sørli, the saga of Sørli the Strong.
Wow.
Yeah, Sørla saga sterka in Old Norse.
I
And
was
he
gonna.
has to, yeah, this Blåman is a champion. He works as a champion for the king. So as a champion, like a warrior in service of the king to do the duels that the king instead of the king, basically. So
Right.
we hear about many.
No, I was gonna ask you. Do you know
Mm.
what the? Do you recall what the when the earliest saga that you've came across that may have mentioned an African, somebody from African origin that
Uh,
that
the
they
earliest,
that they may have
uh,
mentioned it kind of more specific in a way because I I know
um, yeah,
no I know how in
uh,
antiquity they don't
yeah,
necessarily specify like race is not how it is today but
no,
do you know if they gave like I wonder if you recall the earliest saga or mention in a text where they had mentioned a person in during Viking times or whatever, a person
yeah,
from Africa.
um, they didn't write down things in the
Mm,
Viking Age.
right,
They had runes, but that was mainly to just say here lies Halfdan
right,
and
mm,
his
mm,
wife Mrs. Him,
right,
or
right,
this
right, right,
this is owned by. They didn't write down stories. They memorized them and they transmitted them orally. So all these stories are written down later in the medieval ages
true,
based on transmissions. So we don't know what is the earliest.
true,
That could
true,
be actually African. I remember the Sørli saga because that was definitely describing people from Africa and also living in. There's another one. Oh, I completely forgot the name of that saga now, but there is another one where a man meets two sorceresses, two flaggkoner, and they are also mjøksvertrar, that is very, very black.
mm,
And one of those, he has to sort of fight with the sorceresses, and when he wins, one of them becomes his friend for life and helps him out. But
no, that's
exact descriptions, no,
yeah,
mostly in the Sørla saga, yeah,
right.
the
No, that's the
champion of the
thing with
king.
that's the thing with Norse mythology and or during Viking Age, like you said, a lot of it is oral and not as written tradition
Mm,
like how they have in ancient Greece and things like that.
mm,
But
mm.
that's why in some ways I guess it can be kind of difficult to to track or find certain things. I
Yeah,
guess.
Yeah, we probably have to look at the archaeology, and they
Yeah,
did some DNA testing about this, and it showed that yeah, there were quite a lot of people from other places in the world in
absolutely.
Scandinavia also during the Viking Age. And as these sagas show, they're not necessarily taken there as slaves. Some of them are, like
Mm,
you said, champions of the king, or these two sorceresses who are completely free. And
wow.
you have
Yeah.
these two princes who are the Viking chiefs of lots and hundreds of warriors. Nobody ever. It was considered very noble to be descended from them. But the people
Right.
who are descended from the Heljarskins are very proud to be that. So uh, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, where were we?
No, no.
Yeah, also Norse mythology. I could mention one thing about Norse mythology is
Uh-huh.
also that the mythology it presents us with lots of different species of powers, cosmic
Yeah.
powers, natural powers, spiritual powers, and they mix all the time. The gods mix with the giants, the so-called giants, actually the Jötnar. They mix with dwarfs. I mean, it's all about mixing, and all all the dynasties, the Scandinavian royal dynasties, prided themselves of being the result of a mix between the Aesi, the gods, and the Jötnar, for example.
Mm,
So even in the mythology, you don't really find any. And yeah, and Loki, you have this.
Loki.
He's a
Yeah.
god. Yeah,
Right. Loki.
Loki, he's
Everybody
a
knows
god.
Loki. Yeah.
Yeah.
From
But
the
he's
Viking
also
show.
a giant. Yeah.
Uh,
He's like Odin's blood brother. Yeah, these Thor movies, they present him as Odin's son, but he isn't. He is
mm,
Odin's blood brother. He
yeah.
became a god because he mixed his blood with Odin. That's why, because he was originally a Jotun, a so-called giant. Jotun doesn't actually mean a giant. It means something that devours or consumes or eats, and
Mm,
they existed before this universe even took form. Um, then they, yeah.
hmm.
So,
Have you ever heard
mm,
of there was I read some text in the past where somebody tried to assert that the the 8th century that the ship that's in Norway in Oslo, the 8th century Oseberg ship,
yeah, yeah,
have you ever heard anybody saying that it might have depict somebody from some other region or something like that, like the carvings? Have you ever heard that?
yeah.
I don't know.
It is believed that some of the women on Oseberg they were probably buried with belongings or gifts,
Mm, yeah.
and it's usually thought that there is a sort of Celtic style to many of it.
Right.
They think, if I remember correctly, they think that one of their main wood carvers was probably from Ireland at the time,
Mm, okay.
so not from Norway.
Right.
Um, but what was the question? Yeah, where did the women came from other place?
Well, no, there was and I probably shouldn't have mentioned it unless I had all my facts straight. But I thought I heard that there was somebody that said that the 8th century Osterberg ship, the that wood carving there, they said that
Mhm.
it seemed like it depicts people that weren't Nordic looking or
Oh,
whatever. So
maybe the so-called Buddha bucket. It has a
probably
face that looks very Asian,
yeah.
um, and it was probably stolen from Ireland
Right. Right.
or bought or raided from
Right.
Ireland.
And
That was
because I haven't interviewed in a while, I'm gonna have to get better at this when it comes to sharing screen and things like that. Because then I could have showed you the ship, but I don't want to make an accident and cut you off on this interview. So it's not the most important thing. But yeah, yeah. No, so you have a working title on the because we're gonna wrap it up soon. But do you have a working title on this article that it hasn't been published yet? That you're talking about some of these characters.
yeah. It's It's in Norwegian though.
Yeah,
It's a
that's okay.
Liv. Yeah, the name is a bit difficult. It's Ljusvina.
Okay.
And it's and then like Ljusvina, den svarte vikingdronningen. That means Ljusvina, the black Viking queen. And I
Nice.
got inspired. I was inspired by the book about her son, Ljusvina's son, Geirmund Helgesken, which written by Bergsvein Biggeson, which was titled Den svarte vikingen, the black Viking. So I got inspired by that title, focused on the mother. And it's also a little bit about how what could happen to women from abroad when they come into Scandinavia. Uh,
Right.
'Cause, yeah, and I have some stories about some women who maybe have been very smart because they probably realized that if they acted and spoke in a certain way,
Yeah.
they could be taken for royalty. And if a slave could sort of convince people that she was really actually a princess from Ireland or a princess from Frankland or
Mm.
a princess from Järmland, as Ljusvina did, um, whether they actually were or not. If she was convincing, they could actually gain freedom and a lot of respect because people had this respect for royalty back then. So
Yeah.
no
Absolutely.
matter where you were from, if you were from whatever country, as long as you like could say that you came from this big, this like
Mm.
really important family, then people would respect you more. So
Absolutely.
I have actually several stories like that in that article. Mm,
Right. And
mm,
so yeah, so that's something that's in the works. And definitely whenever that's published, I'll definitely post it on my Facebook, and
yeah,
also later on put it in underneath this video right here so people can refer
yeah,
to it. Um
yeah,
yeah. But no, so hey, it was nice talking with you about some getting some insight from you on this Norse mythology and paganism thing that you write about, that you're into, and especially like I said, from the perspective of um, it was nice hearing you talk about what you're working on now about this Black Queen, as you call it,
yeah,
and how it gives more perspective on how there's more cultures and people that are inside of some of these Norse sagas that mostly people always assume that it's everybody in the sagas are white and blonde hair, blue eyed, and things like that.
yeah,
Um, but anyway, so I try to bring people, whether they're international bestsellers or whether they're local famous people here, or what have you, civil rights activists, artists, Egyptologists. It doesn't matter. Whoever I find that's interesting, that are putting out interesting work and things that are relevant to discussions that I like to talk about, I like to bring uh, people like yourself. Um,
yeah.
so is there any other thing that you're working on that you can talk about now, or is that
Uh,
pretty much that one?
Yeah, well, I work with lecturing on my Patreon, so now I am going my new project. Actually, some of these books actually came into being from holding lectures on my
O-
Patreon.
Okay.
For example, Fjölkringi, the Great Knowledge, that's based on a almost 2 year long
And
history.
you have them right there, right?
Yeah, yeah, in
Oh,
Patreon,
could you lift
and
it up? Could you lift
about
it up on the screen? Could you lift it up on the?
the book.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, this
There
is
you
the book.
go. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So this is the result of several years of
That's
work
that's pretty thick.
lecturing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a
Yeah.
thick one
And
right there.
this is also the one all the stories I mentioned here in this talk is uh, somewhere in this book. It's 800 pages, but they are
Wow,
there. uh,
wow.
and
And I see that
and
you got the other one, the
yeah,
seed.
I'm working on this. Yeah, the seed of
Yeah.
Yggdrasil. I showed this. This is about
That's
mythology,
a thick
about
one too. Huh.
yeah, it's about poetical metaphors and poetical symbolism and what they might mean in the Edda poetry. mostly. Yeah,
Okay.
and the Maiden with the Mead is about
Yeah.
traces of initiation rituals in the Edda poem. Um,
Nice.
and what I'm working on now is deep diving into the poems. So I've been going very deeply into singular poems like the Grogalder, the Fjölsvindsmål, and after the Fjölsvindsmål is finished, I'll start with these are titles of the Edda poems. I'll start with the Hyndluljóð, the Song of the She-Wolf, which is also about, by the way, the Hyndluljóð, the Song of the She-Wolf. It's about a young man who wants to know his lineage, and then she starts to reveal his lineages, and it turns out that he's like descended from absolutely everyone in the world,
Mm,
even going into mythical times. And it always says,
mm,
"Alt er det din oppar heimski," and that means all of them are your kind, oppar, the ignorant.
hmm.
Uh, yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I appreciate your time. And
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And like I
Mm,
said, that whenever that article that comes out that we were just talking about some of these characters, then I'll definitely post it. And yeah, keep doing the work. It seems like you have got a lot of writing.
yeah.
Those are yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm also working on some cartoons that,
Okay.
actually some cartoons that I worked on in the 1990s that are
Dealing with
now
mythology.
being published. Yeah, I don't have them here. They
Okay.
are still waiting for them coming
Right,
from the
right,
US,
right.
but they are just about published now. It's called Edda. Well, you can look it up. It's old works, but now actually finally taken out of the desk drawer and published two two graphic novels about Norse mythology. So,
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
There
yeah,
you have it. And then I will definitely make sure I get the correct information with the new publisher
yeah,
that you're going through and using now.
yeah,
And yeah. So no, I appreciate your time. It is a sunny day today in Norway, so you get
yeah.
to enjoy your time. I'm in Oslo. What area of Norway are you? Not too far,
I
I guess.
am very, very close, not far from Oslo, but I'm not in
Okay, yeah, you don't have
Oslo
to give. Yeah, you don't have to give the
actually.
location. Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
You're in the south.
I live by the forest. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, 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 cool.
Yeah.
Alrighty then. I
All
appreciate
right.
you, Maria Kvilhaug.
You
So
too. Thank
I
you.
will
Thank
end
you.
this.
Yeah.
All right. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Bye
Mm.
bye.
Bye bye.